There is also another example where we have started working with different governments in updating, modernizing, and sharing of TVET curriculum. Again, today we are confronted with a youthful population in Africa, most of whom, like I said, 75%, are without a proper education, are without skills for the labor market. And indeed, governments have to take it very seriously, as it is generally said today that we are in the age of the youth renaissance. Unless we begin to respond to their educational needs, they would take the situation into their own hands to do what they think could address the injustices that are meted out in their own views. And therefore, what we have tried to do is work with Nigeria that have shown a lot of good practice in developing TVET programs to share with the rest of the governments in West Africa to start off with. Identify a few very important skills that young people could have to ensure mobility of skills in the sub-region, and work together on adopting or adapting the curriculum that has already been developed by Nigeria in some of these disciplines. Put these on a platform through the Nigerian NBTC ICT Center, so that it could serve as open education resource for West African countries for a start, but hopefully for the rest of Africa. In investing for the effective and strategic use of ICTs in educational settings, it is important to really take note of at least three things that we should do. There must be a policy for the pedagogical use of ICT. ICT as a tool to enhance teaching and learning. But more importantly, there must be some incentive plans for teachers and students to use ICT. Teachers are overwhelmed with responsibilities, but if really they receive the right type of training and support, they would be able to facilitate the use in class and outside class. And I also want to pause here to really look broadly at the use of ICT. I am not only referring to laptops and desktops. There are mobile technologies that could really make it feasible. Some of the challenges are well known. And generally, in Africa, for instance, you have connectivity as a result of the bandwidth. You have electricity shortage. And also, you have rural populations where you do not always find very trained teachers to be able to use the technology. Now, working with the technology, especially mobile technologies, which is discovered that in most of the remotest areas in Africa, you would find somebody with a mobile phone. And uploading programs through the mobile technology could be one of the easier ways for teachers to continue the interaction with students beyond the school period. But for me, I believe the most important area of focus is the third, the public-private partnerships. It's been alluded to that, I think it's the gentleman that did the opening. One person who attempted to really respond to the need globally was able to do a lot as an individual. And today in Africa, we need not look look only at what a government can do. We do not have to look only in terms of education to what the Ministry of Education can do. At the level of government itself, we must take on a multi-sectoral approach. But together with the private sector and the donor communities acting on a well-conceived master plan to improve learning, I believe the use of ICT could really take us quite far. We are told that already a lot of investment is made by governments. However, it is also clear from the slides that were really shown that we are outperformed. The earlier slides also showed that governments invest. However, close to 80 or 90%, 80 to 90% of the investment in education is used to pay the salaries of teachers. Yet at the same time, we know we have a shortage of teachers. Governments have done more than they can really provide in education. It requires additional support. What is the solution? ICTs can leverage costing. In this I mean, if you need 1,000 teachers and you're struggling to really pay for 500 teachers, why not develop the 500 teachers very well to become master teachers and really facilitate the teaching and learning through programs where master teachers would be able to project lessons and less qualified teachers would be guided by these lessons already prepared by master teachers. We can use ICT to improve quality of education in Africa. At the moment, you have one teacher, 70 children in the classroom. It's very teacher-centered. And students think that learning can only come through this one source. But if we enable learning through ICT, students themselves would be less dependent on teachers, and teachers then would be able to assume the role of facilitating. So it becomes more learner-centered. We can use ICT to improve quality of education in Africa through the use of open educational resources. I already gave an example of what we are trying to do in TVET, but we know that there are quite a lot of resources on the net. And what we should really and are working with teachers to do is to be able to use the open education resources and adapt it to their own context. Use it for reference. Use it to help students do research and therefore concentrate more on developing, analytical skills, analytical thinking of students so that what they see, they'll be able to analyze and use wisely. I had already referred to the use of ICT to improve the quality of teacher education programs. Again, we are aware that in most of our teacher education institutions, we're not able to accommodate all the teachers. And the response of government is to reduce the training period for teachers. Instead of 3 years, they have 1 year and 2 years is spent in the field. This is a very good approach, but it could be supported through open and distance learning so that the teacher, while teaching the first year, is able to continue training. A big challenge is the infrastructure. And investing in the use of ICT in education will require that governments are ready to do so. But let me give an example of how Uruguay and Venezuela are coping with investment in the area of the infrastructure to facilitate use of ICT in education. We have the one laptop per child. They work closely with China, but the focus had been on the transfer of technology and skills. So while initially China supported Uruguay and Venezuela, today Uruguay is able to really, develop more satellites, produce computers, the one laptop per child, and through this, both child and parent have programs uploaded to help learning in school and interacting on other social issues. In order to leverage the power of ICTs in this increasingly interconnected and globalized world, there are three things: partnerships and cooperation. And the partnerships, as I mentioned earlier, yes, we do have at the country level, but I think more importantly, we should look at partnerships that would provide South-South cooperation. We learned from the Minister of Morocco that already Morocco does a lot in supporting other countries. And I think this is a possibility. Through South-South and North-South cooperation, we could really be able to think through responses to improve quality. We have to, during this process as well, focus a lot on human resource development, building the right capabilities to ensure that Africa is not really dependent on software from outside, because the software we use is very similar to the kind of textbooks that have been in the system that seem not to be very relevant for the learners. The innovative financing plans, for infrastructure development is one which I believe could be mirrored after what the African Union is doing in the Pan-African University, mobilizing, governments to work together, and with a well-conceived development plan, inviting the multi-sectoral and bilateral partners to support its development. I want to conclude by saying that definitely Africa is quite ready to move into the 21st century if it would be more courageous, to be bold enough to attempt including ICTs in a way that could support the realization of education as a right. Reaching the unreached with the present financial situation will really not, with the best will and intention of African governments, get us there. Given the low economic base, it is not possible that African governments would be able to increase the budgetary allocation to education. However, with innovative approaches and the support of the donor community, especially the private sector, it would become a realization that every child in the remotest of the African rural areas would have access to quality education. I thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ndong-Jatta.